My initial thoughts when I finished watching the match and probably towards the end of it, I didn't really understand how Coello and Tapia let it slip after such a good second set. Tapia probably suffered one of the most severe neveras, which is what a term used in padel for freezing out an opponent.
Galan was absolutely sensational, and I think that basically for me, Galan won the game. Instead of thinking that Coello and Tapia lost the match, I believe that Galan won the match. He was absolutely outstanding. The smashing as well was another key aspect of the final. So Galan hit over 50%, just over 50% of his smashes. Coello had a terrible day at the office from the smashing perspective because he only won 5 out of 21, so that's 23% of his smashes.
Pivotal reasons why Coello and Tapia lost the game is because Coello kept going for smashes, and I don't really understand why. 5 out of 21 is really, really poor. He tried almost twice as many smashes as Tapia did, and we know that Tapia is a better smasher than Coello. I think the reason they've got the upper hand right now is because Chingotto is dominating Coello. I think the cross-court battle across in terms of Galan and Tapia is very, very even. I do agree. I think Galan is the best player in the world right now, but I think Tapia has dominated games as well.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Padel Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional padel, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 56, and as always, joined by my co-host here today, Hugo. It's great to have you on as always. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. Yeah, I mean, I can't complain after our weekend of padel. Very successful weekend of padel for Gons and I on the courts. We won on Friday, we won on Saturday morning, and the Saturday morning match was an epic. We won the tiebreak of the third set. So, yeah, can't complain. Haven't played since, given that I've kind of injured myself. I have a massive blister from my hand, but hopefully back on the court sooner than later.
Yeah, it was a great weekend of padel, but nonetheless, you did leave with a bit of a scar at the end of it with that hand. But yeah, lucky enough that we did manage to pull that last match through, because if we would have lost that one, it would have been quite a bitter one to lose because it was such an epic. But we also broke our negative tiebreak streak, because I think we've maybe lost like the last 5 or 6 tiebreaks before that in a row.
Maybe even more.
So it was great to win a tiebreak again and lose that streak. So yeah, very excited as well for what's to come. And mate, please do heal your hand very quick so then we can get on court.
And my back, to be honest. I've had obviously this issue with my back for quite a bit of time now, and it kind of flares up, and it flared up this weekend again. So yeah, just got to go to the physio and get sorted out. It's amazing how important physios are for people, and just obviously athletes, but people who exercise often. I mean, I think I personally, I'm pretty bad at just going consistently, and it's something that people should be doing. I mean, players basically have a physio session every other day, and I know we're not players, but if you're exercising most days, I mean, it's just, it's very recommended on behalf of doctors, etc. So, yeah, I've got to make an effort to do it because I think my body's suffering and needs a bit of healing.
Yeah, very much. I mean, recovery is key. I think it's becoming so important in the world of sports, and as you alluded to, especially with professional athletes as well. Not that we are professional athletes, of course we're not, but it's still quite important to take out some time of your day, 10 minutes to do some like quick recovery, stretching, mobility type of exercises. But yeah, nonetheless, we should probably crack on with the episode. Yeah, we had one of the majors played out last week. It was quite an epic tournament. The Italy major, so one of the 4 majors of the season, played out in the Foro Italico of Rome. And a great tournament. I mean, what a venue. Absolutely spectacular. The Pietrangeli court is probably my favorite court in all of padel. The way they set it up is, I mean, it's just beautiful. And even the Campo Centrale, sort of like the main stadium is absolutely amazing. And a lot of history, especially related to racket sports, of course, because the Masters 1000 tennis gets played there. So, I mean, must be amazing as a player to go out there and play. And I must say as well, the level of paddle was very, very good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think we should maybe start off with the main course, of course, is the final. Once again, Chingotto and Galan faced Coello and Tapia, and this time it fell to Chingotto and Galan's side. Each set for me was like a different match. Essentially, it was crazy the way that it was going back and forth between them. Excuse me. And I believe now the record stands for Chingotto and Galan. They've won 4 titles out of the sort of 7 tournaments that they've played together. So that's 4 wins and 3 losses. And they've only made finals, which is an absolutely outstanding start to their partnership. Again, I mean, just incredible level from them. So maybe Hugo, I will leave it up to you first to discuss more about the final. What your thoughts, feelings, anything that you want to highlight?
Yeah, there's just so much we could chat about. So I'm going to try to kind of pick out the key points. Firstly, I just wanted to highlight how much I love watching padel played in Italy. Just fans go mental. I think they're one of the best fan bases. They're so passionate, probably because they've got that Latin blood, right? And we know how passionate Spanish people are. And obviously, Argentinians are famous for padel and being passionate about the sport. But I think Italians are really pushing it. And probably due to the fact that padel is one of the biggest sports in Italy now. I mean, it's amazing how much it's grown in Italy. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I've read that Italy is the second country in the world with the most padel courts. So ahead of Argentina, for example, which completely baffled me when I read it. Obviously, they're behind Spain, but that's normal. Spain's the epicenter. So yeah, great to watch the Italy major being played, and obviously Italy will be hosting. They're going to host 3 Premier Padel tournaments throughout the year, which is the most out of any country apart from Spain. If I'm not mistaken, Spain are hosting 4 or 5. So yeah, great setup. I really enjoyed it. And obviously, given that it was a major, it was equivalent to a Grand Slam. So obviously a lot of pressure, a lot of points being distributed, and a very important tournament for the rankings. Now, going into the final, as you said, the main event, the main course of the meal. I mean, I thought that it was probably the most even final so far, at least one of them, between these pairs. Now, I know the result was quite strange, and maybe you think, oh, okay, it wasn't that even, because the first set was 6-4 to Chingotto Galan, the second set was 6-1 to Tapia, and then the third set was 6-1 but to Galan and Chingotto. But when you actually look at the number of points won by each pair, Galan and Chingotto won 76 throughout the match, and Tapia and Coello won 74. So there was a 2-point difference, which is, I mean, obviously shows how tight the match was. I mean, my initial thoughts when I finished watching the match, and probably towards the end of it, I didn't really understand how Coello and Tapia let it slip after such a good second set. I mean, the first set was incredibly even. I thought Chingotto and Galan started off really well, and they managed to get a break early on and kind of shoot off. And they were obviously 5-2 up and serving, if I'm not mistaken. So they were dominating that first set. But then Tapia and Coello really grew into the match, broke their serve, made it 5-4. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 5-4 with Chingotto and Galan serve and 30-all. So it could have easily, another break could have easily happened, and the match, well, that first set could have gone on further, but Chingotto and Galan managed to close it. After that, the Bombarderos, Coello and Tapia, I mean, their level was through the roof. I thought they were sensational in the second set, particularly Tapia. I mean, I thought in the second set, he just dominated. I mean, I just had the feeling that at times he was kind of unplayable in that second set. He only had 1 unforced error throughout all the set, and Coello only had 2. So they were just so solid. And then when they moved into the third set, after having dominated so much, if I'm not mistaken, they were 1-all. And at the start of the set, it felt like Coello and Tapia still had the upper hand, but Chingotto and Galan suddenly got the break. And I felt that Tapia and Coello lost their heads a bit, and they got a bit frustrated because they probably saw that they were kind of ahead in terms of the course of the game and kind of how the flow was going, and they suddenly saw themselves a breakdown. But I felt that after that break, it was almost game over. Once Galan and Chingotto made it 3-1, it just felt it was only going one way. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to give too much else right now. Obviously, I'd like to bounce ideas off you. But the main idea I wanted to bounce off you was the fact that I thought that particularly in the third set, Tapia probably suffered one of the most severe neveras, which is what a term used in padel for freezing out an opponent. I really felt that Galan and Chingotto played as many balls as possible to Coello, and they played that tactic of freezing out Tapia because, well, probably knowing that obviously he's one of the best players in the world, and trying to get him as well, just leave him out of the game as much as possible. And it clearly worked because they won the set 6-1 and they ended up winning the match. And I felt that was maybe one of the keys to Coello and Tapia losing the match and Galan and Chingotto winning the trophy. Don't know what you think, Gons.
Yeah, I do agree with some of your analysis. Maybe one thing that I will point out is I think you're missing a key name in everything you discussed. I think that Galan was absolutely sensational. And I think that basically for me, Galan won the game instead of thinking that Coello and Tapia lost the match. I believe that Galan won the match. Like, he was absolutely outstanding in the first set, because basically when Galan played well, they won. And when he didn't play well, they didn't win. I mean, that first set, Galan started out amazing. And it's true that towards the end of the first set, Coello and Tapia started to play it a bit better. And I think that definitely helped them towards the second set. But Galan, who in the previous two matches actually started the games really bad. So if I'm not mistaken, in Asunción and Mar del Plata, Coello and Tapia won both first sets in those matches, in those finals, and they won them comfortably. And I remember specifically Galan struggling quite a bit in those first sets. So I think in this one, he definitely turned it up, and he probably had in the back of his mind, like, hey, I've started really badly these games lately against Coello and Tapia, so I really need to turn it on. I mean, his smashing was on point in both the first set and the third set. And then in the second set, they did drop off. Coello and Tapia had finished the first set strongly, and they were incredible in that second set. I mean, you gave out some of the stats, barely any unforced errors. And Tapia especially, I felt, grew into the match, was a lot more present at the net, was a lot more prolific offensively. He was just more on it. And then in the third set, where that game at the beginning, it was love 30 to Coello and Tapia, and they did have a chance to break. But in the 15-30, Galan does an incredible smash to win the point, to put it 30-0. And if I'm not mistaken, at deuce as well, he does another incredible smash to get them to the ad. Now, I do think that then that ad, they lost it, but then they ended up winning that game. But still, I think to me just shows how, when he's on it, I mean, he is the best in the world. I think that we've sort of discussed this. For me, he's definitely the best player in the world right now. He has been over the last sort of 6-7 months, and well, even more probably now, probably since he got back with LeBron, when LeBron suffered the injury and they got back towards the second half of last year. So he was absolutely sensational. He did end up essentially being the MVP of the match with the highest contribution score. If I'm not mistaken, he had 16.4. So quite a decent margin to Coello, who was the second with 12.5. And in terms of his smashes, which I think for me, the smashing as well was another key aspect of the final. So Galan hit over 50%, just over 50% of his smashes. Coello had a terrible day at the office from the smashing perspective, because he only won 5 out of 21. So that's 23% of his smashes. And Tapia, similar to Galan, so 7 out of 13, so good percentage, but it's a very low number. So 13 smash attempts for Tapia is just very small. So to me, Galan smashing was just honestly amazing, and what really sort of gave them the edge, because then Chingotto, I mean, we say this a lot about Chingotto, and sometimes he is like incredible and he's like a catalyst and he actually adds a lot. I felt like this match of Chingotto was more of a just hold it out, let Galan do his thing and make sure that he doesn't lose the match. And so I'd probably give him a solid sort of 8 out of 10, but I don't think it was like anything sensational, spectacular. But Galan for me was really the player of the match and the one that won the whole thing for Chingalán, especially in that third set. I mean, some of his smashes were insane, and in that third set, Coello and Tapia a lot of the times actually gave away themselves with the smash. Now, I don't know if maybe that's like something mental or not, but Galan actually had 12 smash defenses, which is quite a lot. Normally, the average is around 5 per match. So I just think that speaks to the fact that Coello and Tapia didn't really have a good day smashing, and Galan was, I mean, incredible. And to be fair, he's probably the best smasher on like in the world alongside Tapia, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just trying to pick up on a few of the points that you mentioned. I totally agree that smashing was one of the most important factors in the final. I thought Galan was prolific with his smashing, and I think Tapia, I mean, his stats aren't bad. Similar in terms of percentage of smashes that he won compared to Galan, practically identical. It's just that Galan, well, tried twice as many. And I was surprised about Tapia not trying more smashes. I think he probably wasn't feeling as confident. He got found out a few times early on in the match and then just felt that he was getting found out and didn't want to try it more. Whereas Galan just kept going for it and going for it. And I think that was a key. I mean, Coello, yeah, one of the most important points one of the most important reasons, I think, and the pivotal reasons why Coello and Tapia lost the game is because Coello kept going for smashes. And I don't really understand why. I mean, 5 out of 21 is really, really poor. He tried almost twice as many smashes as Tapia did. And we know that Tapia is a better smasher than Coello. I mean, that's not hard. Tapia is one of the best smashers in the world, and probably the best alongside Galan. But the fact that Coello is trying twice as many smashes is questionable. Now, I know more of the balls were played to Coello throughout the match. He played almost 60% of the balls, whereas Tapia played about 40% of them, which is quite a significant difference. But still, I'm just surprised. I think that Coello smashing is not really working, at least when they're playing Chingalán. So I think that's a key takeaway into the next game. I think Coello and Tapia should reassess, and maybe Tapia should be covering more ground, covering more of the aerial play. I know that it's kind of counterintuitive because Coello's a left-handed player. He's very tall, so his reach is unbelievable. But I don't think his aerial play right now is at its best. I don't think his bandeja and his víboras are being very effective. And that actually leads me on to my next point. I do think that Galan won the match for Chingalán, but I felt that Chingotto was so important in the sense that he was getting really tight to the net. And there were so many times where he blocked a bajada or a víbora or a bandeja, mainly coming from Coello, and that would either be a winner or generate an easy next smash for Galan to put the point away, because Chingotto was being so prolific at the net, blocking everything. And then that kind of forced Coello to play the bandeja to Galan, which then obviously involved Galan in the points. So I think that was actually one of the key things that happened during the match, and one of the key kind of turning points when Chingotto was really on fire at the net and really close and blocking everything. It forced Coello to play more balls to Galan, and we know that that's a dangerous area because when Galan gets more and more of the ball, you know you're in trouble. So yeah, I think Chingotto was actually really, really important as well. And maybe just one final point. I do agree that I think Galan won the match more than Coello and Tapia losing it. But just looking at the stats, Coello and Tapia had more winners and fewer unforced errors than Galan and Chingotto throughout the match. Now, that is really surprising. I mean, it's not a massive difference, but they had one more winner and 6 fewer unforced errors. And that kind of signals to me, A, that it was a very, very tight match that could have gone either way. I know that the third set was a 6-1, but I do feel it could have gone either way. And B, I almost think that it was more down to the mental side. I just felt that Tapia was a bit out of it in the third set when he wasn't getting as much of the ball. He was making the wrong decisions. He was trying to get involved in the play when maybe it was not the right moment to do it, and vice versa. Sometimes he should have gone cross court and tried to create kind of just surprise Chingotto and Galan and play the ball inside Coello's court, and he wasn't doing it. So yeah, I felt the mental side of the final was almost more important than the paddle itself. I think as soon as Chingotto and Galan got ahead, I really felt that Tapia and Coello's heads dropped. Not that they just suddenly did a Lebron Paquito and just decided to just lose it and go for smashes the whole time, but it just felt that because Chingotto and Galan were so solid in defense and getting that extra ball in, Coello and Tapia just ended up making the wrong decision at some point throughout pretty much every point. So, yeah, I'd say those are the key reasons why the final ended the way it did. But nonetheless, 4-3 head-to-head regarding Galan Chingotto versus Tapia and Coello. They've now won their first major together. So it's 1-1 in the majors for this season so far. We've got 2 majors left. And yeah, I mean, they've obviously cut a big chunk into the points difference between Tapia and Coello, because before the final, Tapia and Coello were about 5,000 points ahead of Galan and Chingotto, and they're now about 4,000 points ahead. So yeah, an 1,000-point reduction, more or less. Is the race on?
Oh yes, the race is definitely on that. Galan as well now is officially world number 2. So he did surpass Tapia individually. Obviously, as a pair, is still that margin that you just mentioned of around 4,000 points with respect to Chingotto and Galan, but still noteworthy. And we know how important this is to Galan, because he's mentioned publicly that that's his main target of the season, to be the world number 1 again, even though there's the World Cup as well. So he got asked to choose between one or the other, and he was very clear that he wanted that world number 1. So, I mean, he's definitely gunning for it. But maybe just to piggyback off some of your points, which I thought like some of them were very good, on the smashing stat one, I also think as well that the sort of high percentage is kind of a bit deceiving, because the smashes that Tapia did win, most of them were like relatively easy por cuatros, because there was, especially in that second set, a lot of the times where the point was set up really well, and he would get very close up to the net, and he would have like a sort of easy short lob where he would just be right at the net and get it out por cuatro. And we did see sort of, I think in the third set, the classic Tapia smash that you think, which is just behind the back of the line, it's money, it's going in. And this time it just didn't. It wasn't like such a good day at the office for him from a smashing perspective, because he normally is just that it's just going to go in no matter where it is on the court. But to your point as well around Coello taking a lot of smashers, I completely agree with that. I think we know the data shows that Tapia is a better smasher with Coello. I just think Coello, from a smashing point of view, he's very inconsistent. He has very wild swings from a percentage perspective. He can have like incredibly high smashing games and be really efficient with his smash, but then he has these really, really lows as well. From Tapia, we have seen it another time, I believe, this sort of not so good smashing game, but it's genuinely quite rare to see Tapia have like a bad game from a smashing perspective. Definitely see it more from Coello. And in terms of the Nevera, I mean, I don't understand why Tapia and Coello don't adjust, because we've seen this repeatedly. Like, this is the tactic for Chingotto and Galan. So I'm sure that they know that this is going to happen. I'm sure that after the match, they've got a team that show them the data. I mean, it might even be Vianney giving them the data. So, so I just don't understand why they don't adjust, or they definitely have to do the, like, they have to work on this, because it can't, essentially it can't keep going, because if not, they're just going to keep on losing, unless they have like an incredible game from Tapia, that even if he has a very low percentage of volume, he is so good that it doesn't, you know, affect the end result. But ultimately, yeah, I just feel like Tapia needs to potentially cover a lot more court. And I feel like in this match as well, a lot of the times he loves to go across to Coelho's side and get the smash. Now, because maybe he didn't have the confidence to do that in this game, he didn't want to do it. And so he took less balls, and potentially that had something to do with it. But we didn't see as much cross court, I feel like, play from Tapia in terms of stepping into Coelho's, even in the volleys. I feel like one of the main assets of Tapia Coelho as a pair was that switch play. They were so good at it. But I feel like right now we're not really seeing this. And with the fact that Tapia is not touching a lot of like balls, he's not getting a lot of volume when playing Chingotto and Galan. I feel like they need to do some sort of adjustment to definitely counteract this tactic from Chingotto and Galan, which is very much clearly working.
I agree. I mean, I think the Nevera is obvious when you look at the amount of balls that, well, when you look at the actual, the direction of play on behalf of each player, both Galan and Chingo, particularly Chingo, was playing a lot of the balls to Coelho. And Galan, it was quite 50-50 across Tapia and Coelho, that already is surprising, because the most natural shot as a paddle player is going cross court. So when you look at Tapia's data, for example, he played about 60% of balls to Galan, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but I think that was more or less the data. Whereas Galan was more of a 50-50. So that does show that there was, that the tactic is there, the Nevera is there. Apart from that final, I can't remember which one it is, when Tapia was ill, and obviously Galan and Chingotto played a lot more balls to Tapia, and they ended up winning the final. I can't remember where it was.
Mar del Plata, I believe.
Yeah, Mar del Plata, that was it. Sorry. Good point. So, yeah, apart from that final, it's clear that the tactic is more balls to Coelho, wait for the moment to finish the point. And I just think Chingotto right now is dominating Coelho in the sense that because his lob is so precise, because he's so comfortable in defense, and he's very comfortable coming up to block the net, Coelho just doesn't really know what to do, because I don't think his bandeja or víbora is consistently strong enough and fast enough to really challenge Chingotto if he's coming up to block it. And then I don't think his lobbing is, well, obviously not as good as Chingotto, nowhere near it. So he just feels like, I can imagine what Coelho's thinking. He's like, I just don't know. I don't really know what to do. If I lob Chingotto, he's just so comfortable to run back to the back of the court and then play a perfect lob. Whereas if I get lobbed and I play a lob, it's more likely for me to play a short lob. I just feel that Coelho feels really kind of singled out, and he doesn't really know how to work his way past that. And I think it has to be Tapia coming in, maybe taking more of the ball, taking up more space on the court. Maybe have Coelho just tighter to the net, really, really tight. And any lob that goes up and above Coelho's reach, let Tapia come across the court and grab it. I don't know. Obviously, they know more than us. Their team will know more than us. But that's my feeling, and I get a sense that that's your feeling right now. I think Tapia has to find a way to get more involved in the play, because actually I think when he doesn't, he gets frustrated, as anyone would do. And I think we saw in the third set, he maybe takes a few extra risks, maybe too many risks that cost the pair. I remember one of the games in the third set, I can't remember whether it was the 4-1 or the 5-1. Tapia made like 3 unforced errors in a row, trying to go for slightly too risky shots. Now we know it's Tapia. He's probably the trick shot king, so he's the one to take the risks. But still, I think that cost them a little bit in the final. So we'll see.
Yeah, and something actually quite interesting, which I just had a look at, because I was quite curious about. You talked about the direction of play. Funnily enough, in Santiago, so the last final, actually Galan played even more to Coello than he did in this final in the Italy major. So you mentioned it was 51-49, so basically quite even. And in Santiago, he actually played way more to Coello. It was 54 to 46% to Tapia. It was the reason why actually Tapia didn't basically have a lot of volume was because Chingotto was just playing cross court to Coello. Yeah, I think you mentioned the sort of stats, but it's basically a 70-30 split. So the thing is, I feel like, especially if you're playing cross court, so if they see this, right, if they see that Chingotto is just basically playing cross court, I feel like Tapia there has to essentially come in somehow, because that's the easy ball to come into, right? If you know that the players are playing cross court, you can just easily come in, especially Tapia that essentially has the forehand volley to play if they're playing cross court. You can just come in with a forehand volley and essentially tuck in and then maybe play it across Galan or something.
And he did do it a couple of times and it worked.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like maybe that's the sort of adjustment that they need to do, because and you mentioned as well the lobs. So for example, Tapia coming in behind to get a lot of the lobs, maybe Coello staying at the net. Now I don't know if then they would do because in the classic where both players are essentially right-handed players, maybe they would just switch, right? But this could be a bit different because then you've got Coello as a lefty playing on the left. So maybe that's not as easy to do, or maybe can add like another variable sort of just to essentially change things quite a bit. But I feel like this is definitely something that they need to work on, because I just don't see Galan and Chingotto changing, right? I mean, this is clearly working. And yeah, so I feel like Coello and Tapia need to go back to the lab to cook something up to beat these guys.
Agreed. And maybe just to leave one final kind of headline, my personal feeling is that the reason why Chingotto and Galan right now have the upper hand slightly against Tapia and Coello, because obviously it's 4-3 in terms of head-to-head so far, is because obviously the tactic is working really well, and probably their tactic is damaging Coello and Tapia more than what Tapia and Coello are proposing on kind of vice versa. So like, I think their tactic right now is working better than what Coello and Tapia are doing against Chingalán, because I don't think they've actually changed their style of play in terms of what they kind of how they play against other pairs versus how they play against Chingalán. I think it's very similar. Whereas I actually think Chingalán have really come up with a specific strategy to play against the number ones in the world. So maybe it's a matter of adapting when they play this El Clasico, as per se. And then just one other kind of final, and this is my own opinion, I think the reason they've got the upper hand right now is because Chingotto is dominating Coello. I think the cross-court battle in terms of Galan and Tapia is very, very even. I mean, I do agree. I think Galan is the best player in the world right now, but I think Tapia has dominated games as well. But I just don't feel, apart from maybe one of the 7 games where Coello was sensational, I think he pretty much won it on his own. I think all the other finals, it just feels that right now Chingotto's got the upper hand. He's in Coello's head. He's making him do things that he doesn't feel comfortable with, kind of having to defend from the back of the court, which is obviously not Coello's strength, having to go for bandejas. I just feel that Coello, he doesn't look very comfortable on court. He was also going for really aggressive bajadas, obviously because Chingotto and Galan are so good at the net, but they weren't really working. I mean, I do remember 2 or 3 bullets from Coello, but then a lot of mistakes as well with the bajada, probably more than the points that he won with his bajada. So, yeah, that's my feeling. I think that the key right now is that Chingotto has found the way to dominate Coello, and I don't think Coello and Tapia have found the way to get out of, to basically let Coello out of that cage.
Yeah, and I think another way to put it, or at least how I see it, which is very similar to what you said, but I don't know if you would fully agree with it. But basically, I think that Galan number 1 in terms of sort of like how they are right now, or since they've essentially been paired up, Galan and Chingotto, Tapia number 2, but like really close. Then you've got Chingotto number 3, and then Coello number 4, but slightly further than the difference between Galan and Tapia. That's how I would look at it.
I agree. And when you think about the players on paper, I had always thought that Coello was in the top 3 players in the world. It was always Galan, Tapia, Coello, at least in the last year and a half. It's amazing how Chingotto has just jumped into, well, his level has just peaked and it's just grown exponentially to the point where I genuinely feel that right now he could be considered one of the best players in the world, whereas before, obviously he was considered a top 10 player in the world, but I would have never thought that Chingotto could challenge to be the number 1 seeded player in the world. So credit where credit's due. I mean, what a man, little man, but what a man.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have put it any better, honestly, because thinking about it now, if at the beginning of the year, you would have put Chingotto definitely behind the top 3 that you just mentioned, but even Super Pibes, even Lebron, even I would probably say Paquito as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, you'd probably then put him kind of there just after Paquito. But now, I mean, Super Pibes, like, to be honest, like Chingotto is definitely top 3, like has to be.
100%. And to be honest, you could have even made an argument that Yanguas could have been better than Chingotto at the start of the season. I mean, you could have said that he's more aggressive. He hasn't had the chance to play with a top player like Chingotto, etc. Now, just different world. So hats off to Federico Chingotto. He's also just such a nice guy. So
yeah, he's lovely.
You have to be happy for him.
Yeah. And you know that he puts in the work as well and that he wants to continue to get better. So, I mean, his attitude on court, off court, everything about him is just sensational.
Agreed. What a man.
Maybe moving on to our next topic, well, Hugo, you were the one that brought this up, so maybe I'll leave it to you to introduce it because I think it's a very interesting one.
100%. So basically we just wanted to discuss the kind of, we obviously during our previous episode we questioned whether the top 4 pairs not playing the P2, so the P2 that was played, the P2 in Bordeaux that was played just before this Italy major, whether the top 4 pairs not playing it was the right decision. And we kind of came to an agreement that for Chingalán and Tapia and Coello, it was the right decision because they were winning all the tournaments. They weren't really in need of points. But for Paquito and Lebron and for the Super Pibes, it was a good opportunity to win a tournament, to feel like, hey, we are the best, and go into this week in Rome as, just kind of with an extra push, an extra confidence push. And, well, obviously, Coqui and John, as everyone knows, won Bordeaux's P2. And they actually lost in the first round of the Italy major against a great pair in Jairo Bautista, if I'm not mistaken, and Fran Guerrero. I mean, I've obviously spoken about Fran Guerrero previously, a top young prospect, a great forehand player who's got everything and I think is going to go really far. And Jairo Bautista, I think, again, young prospect, unbelievable smashing, aggressive player, really talented. So it is a great pair. And they actually knocked out another big pair just after knocking out Coqui and John. I can't remember right now who they are, but they did knock out a massive pair in the following round. So credit where credit's due. But still, I personally felt that Coqui and John suffered from having played the final in Bordeaux on Sunday and then having to play the first round of the Italy major on a Tuesday. So literally less than 48 hours later, because I think they played kind of in the morning or midday. So kind of the question that we wanted to pose was it the right thing to do for them? What should Coqui and John have played the P2? Because that kind of meant that they sacrificed not doing well in the Italy major. What do you think, Gons?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an answer based on 2 points, essentially. One is going to be kind of points math based, and then another is going to be a bit more emotional, psychological based.
Love that.
And they might contradict each other. But I mean, from a points perspective, so P2, if you do win it, gives you 500 points. Now, for Koki and John to win a P2, is it realistic? Obviously, yes, they did do it. But let's not forget as well that they would have had to face Yanguas and Garrido in the quarterfinals if everything would have sort of gone according to how it should have, because Yanguas and Garrido did lose in the first round. So that would have been a really tough match. And then you still have to go through like semifinals and finals. So it's not a given, let's say. They are obviously one of the top pairs. They are really good, and even if the top 4 pairs are not listed in a P2, like it's still not like a 100% given that you are going to win. So you might like drop out before, but let's just say, because obviously they did win 500 points. Now, what does that give you if you do go all out? And then compared to a major, where does that stand? Like what round do you have to get to essentially equal that or do better? So in the quarterfinal of a major, you get 360 points. And in the semifinal, you get 720 points. So I would say that a realistic target for Koki and John at a major is quarterfinals. So from this perspective, you definitely say like, okay, winning a P2 and then potentially reaching the quarterfinals, like you're not going to get realistically further than that. If they do get to a semifinal, it would have been kind of massive news for them. So it does make kind of sense that, let's say you go full out for that week and then you win a P2, you get 500 points. And then, because realistically, if you wouldn't have done that P2, you probably would have gotten to the quarterfinal of the major, which would have been 360 points. So that, I think that's from the sort of points from the points view or perspective. And then from a psychological perspective, 100% makes like a ton of sense. I mean, it's massive. Getting the chance to win your first professional title, I think that could do a lot of confidence. Maybe not for the tournament right after, as we did see, because they did lose in the first round, and I'm sure that they would have loved to continue on. But I'm sure there's a bit of not only did they play like on Tuesday, so they had the final on Sunday evening, they played on Tuesday evening. I mean, that's such a short turnaround. So physically, I'm sure they would have been quite tough. But not only physically, right? I think mentally as well. You just come off the back of winning your first title. I'm sure that you're kind of in a state where you're like more celebrating that win rather than focusing on your tournament right ahead. But I do think that in the long run, that will be quite positive for them as a pair, for them to stick together and for them individually, because I think that will give them a lot of confidence going forward. So I personally think it makes a lot of sense for John and Koki. Now, if we ask the question for a top 4 player, now this is where it gets interesting, because from a points perspective, it doesn't make sense, or at least you would think it doesn't make sense, because realistically they're going to get to the semifinals. We did see it to the major, the 4 main pairs got to the semifinals, so they won more points that they would have won if they would have won at Bordeaux. But psychologically, could that have made them given them the extra boost to potentially then make a final? Could that give them the extra boost to reduce the noise around them? Because let's face it, Paquito and Lebron have huge alarm bells around them. Los Super Pibes equally as well. And could a title win also given them the confidence to go on and do well the rest of the season, even if maybe in the major they wouldn't have done so well, or they would have just gone to the semifinal. So I personally think that they still should have played that P2, because even if they did go out earlier, I still think that would have been a massive boost for them individually, and I think that it would have given them a lot of confidence going forward. But yeah, I'll give it up to you now, Hugo.
No, I mean, I think I obviously don't want to dwell on it too much. I agree with all the points you've kind of gone through. And I think what proves the point as well is that Alex Reith and Momo Gonzalez, who also made the final and also played on Sunday, obviously played in the Rome Major. If I'm not mistaken, their first game was on Wednesday rather than Tuesday. So they had that slight advantage compared to Coqui and John. But they won it and they made the quarterfinals. And they played a good game against Lebron and Paquito. Obviously, they lost in 2 sets, but it was a breaks difference in each set. Sorry. So I think that the confidence that they earned from playing and reaching a final, their first final of the season, was huge. I think they took that into the Rome Major, and I think that's really important for them going forward. So I can imagine how, they just look much more confident on court, and I think it's helped them as a pair. Particularly Ruiz, obviously, he's been suffering with an injury. His confidence and maybe his level of play is not where it usually is. So yeah, I totally agree. I think for pairs like Coqui and John, so any pair seeded beyond the top 4, 100% makes sense. But even for Paquito and Lebron and Stupan Dineno, I think it would have been key. I mean, I think it would have been really important because their semi-finals against Chingalán and Coello and Tapia were good semi-finals, but they were quite one-sided, weren't they? I mean, they were dominated, at least in terms of the actual scores. Obviously 2 sets to love in both cases, and pretty dominant in terms of the amount of games that both Stupan Dineno and Paquito and Lebron won against their respective semi-final rivals. So I think, who knows, maybe that would have helped their confidence. They would have won a tournament. They would have felt like they are the winners, the best pair in a tournament. Could that have helped them? Well, kind of beat and increase their level against Chingalán or Coello and Tapia? Maybe. I mean, we'll never know. They're obviously, all the pairs, including all the top 4 pairs, are registered for the Genova P2, which kicks off not this week, but next week. So there's a week break now in the Premier Padel calendar. And now all the pairs are registered. So I think what happened with the Bordeaux was kind of a one-off case. I think just the top 4 pairs felt that they were better off having a bit of a rest after the South American tour and going into a major just fully rested. But yeah, just to reiterate, what a great week of paddle in Italy, and looking forward to the rest of the season, right?
Yeah, very much so. We've got, as you mentioned, the week after the Genova P2, and then after that we come back. Well, we go to Spain, and we go to Malaga for the P1, which I think will be also very, very exciting. Fans, especially in the south of Spain, love a bit of paddle. So very excited for that P1. And as always, Hugo, it's been a pleasure to have you on and to talk about paddle with you. And I hope all our audience enjoyed this episode. And please do leave a like and leave a comment as well with any feedback that you guys might have. And do subscribe as well to our channel. And we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, Gonzo, I actually just wanted to leave a quick gem before we log off. I just kind of had a vision, and I think that Galan and Tapia are going to play together at some point. It just feels like it has to happen. I know they're both backhand players, but imagine that partnership. I mean, we've seen Tapia play on the forehand with Bella, and we've seen Galan. He's even come across in interviews and said that if he has to play on the forehand side because it benefits the team, he was referring to playing with Spain, he would do it. What a partnership that would be.
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty epic, but I feel like you'd lose a bit of both. Like, you'd lose the essence of the player. I don't know. I'm still not fully bought into it, but maybe that's just because it just kind of hit me like a truck.
Yeah, I just thought I'd drop it in, just to get maybe our fans' thoughts as well. Just to, does anyone think that could happen? Do we think that they would be the best pair in the world? Because when we think about it, individually, they're probably the 2 best players in the world. At least that's what Gonz and I think right now. So would that make them the best pair? Please leave your thoughts, people. And other than that, have a great week and catch you soon.